What's up, guys? Today I'm bringing you an exclusive interview with the upcoming Riot MMORPG director, Greg Street, also known as Ghostcrawler. This is a small segment from a 2-hour interview that I had with Greg, so if you want to watch the full interview, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when it drops. Also, I'm streaming live on Twitch 5 to 6 days a week, so visit me there. It's the best way to connect with me personally, and let's begin. Right. I do want to talk to you about monetization, but before I ask that question, what do you think separates games like WoW and Final Fantasy 14 from the others that just don't make it? Like, what is it about them? I mean, is it just the budget? Is it the creative design that's behind it? Is it a team that's running it? I mean, it could be multiple things, but it just... you know, there's plenty of good ideas, and there's plenty of, I'm sure every MMO that comes out, it's like, hey, we feel like we can do this better. And I love the fact that when we talked earlier, you're talking about, hey, I think one of the things that Riot does very well is they look at games like Dota and think, hey, maybe we could do this better by doing this, and they've just had they've had solid success with that. I'm sure that's the mindset with a lot of MMO developers, but they still just don't make it. Like, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you're right that budget is part of it. Like, again, thinking of rating, it's a spectacle. And in Final Fantasy, when a boss comes down and like maybe the guitar kicks in or something, like they don't mind making like custom music for boss fights and stuff like that. Like it is something amazing to see. And you can make a really, really fun encounter that's pretty much just like a big ogre dude hitting you, but it's just not the same epic scale. It's not the sense of like, this is something. But yeah, budget's part of it. I also think the bigger games, and maybe the ones with the bigger budget, are just better at serving a broader audience. So say you make an MMO and you're like, hey, this MMO is PvP only because we think we can just make a better game if it's PvP. Well, you could probably guess there are going to be players that are like, well, I'm out. That's not me. Final Fantasy has a great like crafting game. It has a great social game. It lets you decorate your houses. So it serves players a lot of really different motivations.
Right. I don't know if you can answer this, but do you feel comfortable with the budget that you have for the Riot MMO?
Oh, that's actually a really interesting question. I think I can answer it. One of the nice things about Riot is we're not going to run out of money, right? I'm not going to have a publisher that's like, hey, if you got to ship by Christmas or we're canceled. Riot will cancel this game if the game isn't good enough. They're not going to cancel the game because it gets too expensive. And those go hand in hand. We could make a very expensive bad game and then I would get fired. We could make a less expensive game that still really captures hearts and minds, but it's not a blank check, right? Like I have to prove, and the team has to prove that whatever Riot is putting into it is worth it, because they could spend the money somewhere else. They could make a different game. They could double down on Valorant or something. So it's definitely not a blank check, but it's also not like we're not a startup where, oh gosh, we're out of money. What are we going to do? I can always go back and ask for more. Whether or not I get more is going to depend a lot on what they think how does the game look? What do playtesters say? How are we doing, about hitting our milestones? So that is how, in the very simplest sense, you can think of it as you get some money. If you spend it well, they're going to give you more. If you don't spend it well, you probably don't. And in our case, rather than shipping the bad game, it would just get shit canned.
That's awesome. But I think that distinction, I think, is massive. Not only from your perspective, but especially from the consumer's perspective. Like just knowing that, hey, this MMO that's coming out, it's like money isn't the issue. They'll cancel it if it's not good. So like even that, like just that notion, it's like if this MMO were to be canceled, I would be devastated. I'd be really disappointed. I think everyone in the MMO world would be, the MMO community would be pretty devastated that it got canceled. But at the same token, I think it would bring another level of respect. Would be like, hey man, at the end of the day, it wasn't a money thing. It just wasn't good enough. They just maybe they'll revisit it later. Like I would have a lot of respect for a company that would cancel a game because of that, rather than the actual money that's going into it. That's really, Yeah,
I completely agree. The disappointment from players, and I understand there'd be disappointment. I'd be disappointed. But that's coming from, I had such high hopes for this game, and I'm disappointed that it didn't get there. And they don't want a bad game. They don't want us to
Right.
like ship the game no matter what. They want a good game, and that's
Absolutely.
if we can't deliver a good game, what are we doing?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things that the game does need to do is it needs to generate revenue. Okay, so I'd love to get your thoughts on the differences between, from your perspective, as the guy that needs to generate the revenue. Love to hear your thoughts on a sub-based model versus a free-to-play model.
The truth is they're both viable. What you generally get in a sub-based model is fewer players, because fewer players can afford it, but are a very steady revenue stream. So you might say, I would rather 1 million players who pay me $15 a month regularly than 5 million players who sometimes pay and sometimes don't. That's just the economics of it. So generally, if you want to go free to play, it's because you think you can have a lot of players and you'll be okay even if they don't individually spend a lot of money. You'll have a lot of players who spend nothing. You'll have some players who spend more, but on average, you're assuming they're not going to pay that much, and you make up for it with size. And you see that in a lot of mobile games, not just mobile MMOs, but mobile games in general. Assume that they don't have very long a lifespan, so they need to like make money right away. Big audience right away, because then people are gonna drop them and move on to the next thing. It's also interesting that in China, a little less so Korea, but still more so I think than in the West, the notion of pay for power is not as, it's almost repulsive to a lot of Western players, because they're like, it comes to them as like, well, that's not fair. Like, why should that person have better gear than me when they just spent money on it?
Right.
But at least to a Chinese mindset, sometimes they're thinking, well, I don't want to spend a lot of time grinding to get this item. Why can't I just pay you to get it right away and get to the good stuff? Maybe I just want to raid. Let me skip to the good stuff. Particularly, this was more true in both Korea and China, when a lot of gamers had to play it at PC bongs or PC cafes, because then they're literally paying for the hour.
Right.
So rather than paying per hour to get 100 hours to get a sword, let me just buy the sword and skip all that stuff. So we're not going to do pay to win. We're not going to do pay to power. I'm pretty confident saying that. The business
that's a big one.
I probably said that, or a lot of players assume it's just not Riot's style.
Right.
We really want players to feel like they're welcome back in the game at any time. And if life is rough right now and you're between jobs, or you just can't, you can't pay for the subscription, I'd rather them not churn out rather than be able to keep playing. So that's why Riot has traditionally liked free to play with purely cosmetic purchases. But again,
is that enough though? Because an MMO, again, I'm very ignorant to the game development and the budget side of things when it comes to MMO, but I would imagine that it's very expensive to maintain and run and create an MMORPG. Is it feasible? Is it
probably
feasible?
The most expensive kind of game to make.
Right? I would think so. Is it feasible to have
close is like huge open world, Horizon Zero Dawn, Assassin's Creed, Red Dead Redemption style. Those are also very expensive, but an MMO needs everything. It needs matchmaking. It needs a chat system. It needs, a gear system. Every system you can imagine. So they are very expensive to build. And if it's a super content heavy game, they're also very expensive to run.
Absolutely.
If it's a more PvP based game or a more sandbox game, it's less expensive to run because players are providing a lot of the content.
Right, absolutely. Is it feasible for a large scale MMO, like a big budget MMO, to sustain with a free to play model that just monetizes off of cosmetics? Honestly, because for me, I'm thinking no. For me, technically, theoretically, yes. Obviously, if everyone is buying these costumes and stuff, sure. I know for a fact it would be. But honestly, realistically, I feel like the answer to that is no. What would you say?
No, we've done the math, and I think there is a world that works out.
Really?
You can have enough players who are willing to pay enough on cosmetics to fund a really big game.
Really? How often would you expect, in order for that to work, how often would you expect to have to release new cosmetics? Because obviously you can't release one new cosmetic a year to be able to, right? No one's going to buy, right? That's not enough money.
And I also know from experience that players resent when they feel like you're spending too much development effort on cosmetics. Like to look at League of Legends, for example, if we stopped making champions and just kept making skins, at some point players are like, well, this kind of sucks. You're only focused on the money-making side of the game. So you need to do both. You need to make sure the game balance is good. You need to update everything that you can in order for players to feel good about it. So, yeah, again, we don't even know for sure exactly what our business model is going to be, but I've done the math enough to convince myself that if we said, yeah, can you launch a game with just cosmetics? Probably you can.
Okay, interesting. So obviously you just stated, as far as the Riot MMO goes, there's no confirmation, there's none of that. But for you personally, what do you, as a gamer, what do you personally prefer? Do you personally prefer to play a sub-to-play game or a free-to-play game that has cash shop? That has an in-game cash shop?
Yeah, the one thing that bothers me about a sub is kind of the guilt of, I'm paying for this game and I'm not playing it right now. And so for a game like World of Warcraft, I came back and played the last expansion. And then when I stopped playing, I felt like, well, the right thing to do is to cancel my subscription.
Right.
But then if I want to jump in and play one night, well, am I going to start my subscription up again? Like, there's a little more friction there to really fitting in how I play. Whereas, like, if I want to play Valorant, I'll just pick up Valorant. If I want to put Valorant down for 6 months and pick it up again, great, I'll do that. Now, yeah, there are battle passes and things like that can be subscription-like. But overall, I think that's the one flaw in the subscription model is, as a player, you feel like the right thing to do is to turn it on and off all the time.
Right.
Kind of a habit.
Right. What do you think about the games that are free to play but have like a subscription option where you get bonus stuff like extra loot drop percentage, extra experience, a lot of games do that. Like BDO does it, even Lost Ark does it to a certain extent. What do you think about that model?
I think as a player, I think that's pretty cool because it gives you the option to kind of pay how you want. If you're like, hey, I'm not ready to commit money to this game, awesome. But if you're like, no, I'm in, I know I'm going to spend lots and lots of hours in this game, I don't mind, spending a little more for a better experience. I think that's pretty cool. It is, again, like I said before, with the pay for power, it's a slippery slope, and you can easily turn off players if you're too heavy-handed with that.